Welcome back. We are now going to do indicator 10, which is still a part of unit 3. And our learning target, I can apply properties of operations to generate equivalent expressions. So these properties are very, very important. So let's talk about what is an equivalent expression. Expressions that have the same value, are equivalent expressions. So with the same value, okay? So if I say 7 plus 3, or if I say 3 plus 7, these are equivalent expressions, okay? Because they come to the same thing, all right? And equivalent expressions can be calculated, or they can be written using commutative and associative properties. Okay, now one thing to remember about the commutative and the associative properties, all these properties are relevant only to addition and to multiplication. It will not work for subtraction or division. Okay, so this is why I'm saying it. If I say commutative property, for example, okay, changing the order of addends or factors does not change the sum or product. So addends in addition or factors in multiplication. This is what it means. Okay, if I take addition first. And just like above here, if I say 7 plus 3, this is not any different from 3 plus 7. So what I'm doing is, if I have 7 plus 3, I have just changed the order. And now I have just put 7 plus 3 to 3 plus 7. So it doesn't give me a different sum, because 7 plus 3 gives me 10. And 3 plus 7 also gives me 10. So changing the order is not going to change my sum in addition, okay? And then for multiplication, it goes the same way, okay? And in this, if I write 7 times 3, it's not going to give me a different product if I switch these factors around and I do 3 times 7. Because 7 times 3 is 21, but so is 3 times 7. Okay, so therefore, please remember that only with addition and multiplication this works. When I am changing the order of the addend, so I am changing the order of the factors, I am not getting a different sum or a product. But you can't do this with subtraction. 7 minus 3 is very different from 3 minus 7, guys. Okay, in one you'll get a positive integer, in the other you'll get a negative integer. 7 divided by 3 is very, very different from 3/7 written as a fraction. So yeah, those are totally different, because 7 divided by 3 is a much bigger number compared to 3 over 7, or 3 divided by 7, if you think of it, okay? You'll get a small decimal portion. So those properties do not work with subtraction and division. These work only with addition and multiplication. Changing the order will not change the sum or the product, okay? The next one I want to go over here is the associative property. Again, this is for addition and this is for your multiplication. And it's saying changing the group of addends or factors does not change the sum or product. So let's say for addition, this is again for addition, or it is for multiplication. Okay, for addition or for multiplication only. So if I give you something like, let me do 4 plus 2 plus 3. So here's my grouping right now, is 4 plus 2 plus 3. This is no different than 4 plus 2 plus 3. Okay, so in this case, as you can see, based on order of operations, based on PEMDAS, I have got to do parentheses before addition. So if I do 4 plus 2, I get 6 plus 3, and I get 9. And in this case, if I do 2 plus 3, so I've got 4 here, and I've got 2 plus 3 is 5. And so again, 4 plus 5 is 9, so 9 is equal to 9. It doesn't matter how I group it, I will still end up with the same sum. Same thing with multiplication. If I write 5 times 2 times 3, or if I do 5 times 2 times 3, it doesn't matter how I group the factors, I will still end up with the same product. So 5 times 2 is 10 times 3, or I can do 5 times 2 times 3 is 6, and in both cases, I end up with 30. Okay, so the order again in how I'm grouping these does not change the sum or the product in the associative properties. This is commutative, is just flipping it. Okay, changing the order. And here it is changing the grouping, associate, because we associate with people, and people means groups. So that is why please be very careful when you are asked about commutative and associative property, and you don't confuse those two. Again, commutative is when the order is changed. Associative, please remember, based on grouping, because we associate with people, and in that we are grouping. So if that makes sense, that it'll help you remember. Okay, so that's the associative property of addition or multiplication. All right, then let's look at the next one. It is the addition property of 0. Okay, so any number that is added to 0 gives me that number. So the sum of any number and 0 is that number. So if I say 7 plus 0, it's going to give me 7. I can say 10,000 plus 0, you'll get 10,000. Okay, so any number plus 0 is that number itself. Okay, then let's talk about the multiplication property of 0. The product of any number and 0 is going to be 0. Okay, so if I say 5 times 0, anything times 0 is 0. Let's say 1 million times 0, it doesn't matter. You can come tell me, Ms. Joshi, I have $1 million times 0. That means you have nothing. Okay, so any number times 0 gives me 0. Okay, multiplication property of 1, the product of any number and 1 is that number. So if I say any number times 1 gives me that number. So 4 times 1 is 4. 100 times 1 is 100. So it doesn't matter. Whenever you multiply any number with 1, it is going to be that number. So these are the properties which you have got to know. And then now we are going to use our knowledge of these properties to solve some problems. Okay, and you will have to mention over there as to what property you are using. Okay, so you're going to simplify the expressions now. Okay, I'm going to erase this. And if I say simplify the expression 7 plus 12 plus x, if I give you something like this, okay? So, and you are supposed to solve this. So, what we need to do over here is, we talked about like terms and unlike terms. Numbers are the same things. I can always add a number with another number. But when I have a number and I have a variable, I cannot squish them together. Okay, those are unlike terms. They cannot be added. So let's look at this. I can see 7 is a number. I can see 12 is a number. And then I see x, which is an unlike term. So I know I can do 7 plus 12, okay, because those are like terms. So I am going to look at this, and this is grouped over here. So now I know that I have to change my grouping in order for me to be able to add these. So when I'm changing that grouping, this is my addition, associative property of addition. Okay, this is my associative property because it's addition of addition. Because associative property can be of addition or of multiplication. Okay, and then I am going to add 7 and 12. And when I add 7 and 12, I get 19 plus x. Okay, so you're adding like terms. Add like terms. So in this case, it would be 7 plus 12. Those are the like terms. Okay, now here's the thing. This is my final answer because I cannot do this. Because some children do this. They have the 19 plus x and they go ahead and write it like this. You cannot squish it together like this. There's a big difference in addition and multiplication. Okay, so yeah, 19 plus, let's say x was 10. Plus 10 is very different from 19 times 10. So do not try to squish them together. You cannot, because these are unlike terms. This is going to be a final answer in the simplified form. Okay, so let's do another problem. And let's say that I am going to add two numbers that are decimals. Okay, so let's just use decimals in this one. Okay, so if I give you 6 and 1/10 plus x and then plus 8 and 4/10. Okay, so I have this right now. Now what I can see over here is my numbers are far apart. So my first goal when something is grouped together is to see, is this 6 and 1/10 next to the 8 and 4/10? If not, I have got to flip. I just can't jump from here all the way around. So I am first going to use the commutative property of addition. Remember changing the order? That's the commutative property. This is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to use the commutative property of addition. Okay, and please remember it's commutative. Very often children write commutative and that is not correct. It's commutative property. Okay, so x plus 6 and 1/10 plus 8 and 4/10. Now that the numbers are next to each other, the decimals are right there next to each other, so now I can change the grouping. Okay, so I'm going to change the grouping. I'm going to do x plus 6 and 1/10 plus 8 and 4/10. So I've changed the grouping, and that is called the associative property of addition. Associative property of addition. Okay, and then when we add this, please be very careful. You have done how to add decimals. Align the decimal under decimal, same place value under same place value when you're adding, so you don't make mistakes. And then you start adding on the extreme right and then move left, decimal under decimal. 4 plus 1 is 5 and 6 plus 8 is going to give me 14. So my answer is x plus 14 and 5/10. Do not try to squish those together because a variable and a number are unlike terms. Okay, if I had another number, I could add it. But I cannot squish the variable and number together. So this becomes my final solution. Okay, Let's do one in which I have, let's see, give you one with multiplication because you've done with addition. Okay. So if I give you 5, 11, y, now this is multiplication. Okay, because anytime a parenthesis is like this and a number is outside, basically it is multiplication. Okay, so let's change the grouping so that the numbers can be next to each other. Okay, so when we change the grouping over here, we are going to be using the associative property of multiplication. The associative property of multiplication. So please remember that. So I'm going to change the grouping 5 times 11 y. Okay, and then we know that 5 times 11 is 55, and since this is multiplication, not addition, we can do 55y, because let's say y was 10, I would be doing 55 times 10. We cannot squish the numbers together in addition because that's something totally different. X plus 55 is very different from 55x. Okay, so in addition, you just cannot just combine them together, but multiplication, you can multiply this times this times this. So you can write it out like this. Okay, so this is your multiplication. Use the associative property of multiplication. Okay, let's go ahead and do some with the addition, subtraction properties. Let's do the associative property, or we've done that. Let's go ahead and do some multiplication properties, okay, of 0. So if I give you an expression, say simplify 9 times 0 times r. If something like this is given to you guys, please remember decimals are written at the bottom, but when it's written up here, this also means multiplication. Okay, so we are first, when it's written like this, we are first going to use the associative property of multiplication. Okay, associative property of multiplication. So I am going to, just do this. 9 times 0 and then r. These all mean the same thing. And then anything times 0 actually means is going to come to 0. So that is my multiplication property of 0. Okay, so this is going to be 0 r, and anything times 0 is 0. So guys, it doesn't matter when you have multiplication and you have 1 0 also in that factor area. You might have 10 times 80 times 1 million times 0. Guess what? Just seeing that 0, whatever you multiply before is going to end up as a product of 0. So any number times 0 gives me 0. So that is the multiplication property of 0. Okay. So as soon as you saw 0 over there, there was multiplication. You know that when you solve it, your product is going to come to a 0 because of the multiplication property of 0. Okay. Let's do one last problem, and we are going to 4 and 5/10. Now look how I've written the decimal, which is very different from what the multiplication part was earlier, which was up here. Okay, so 4 and 5/10 times r times 1. Okay, so we can do the associative property of multiplication first. Okay, so we are grouping it. So associative property of multiplication. I am just going to go ahead and group, in this case, r times 1. Because based on the associative property of multiplication, I've got my grouping, and then I know that anything times 1 is the number itself. Anything times 1 is the number itself. So r times 1 is going to give me r. So that is the multiplication property of 1. Any number times 1 is the number itself. Okay? So this becomes 4 and 5/10. R times 1 is r. Okay? So this is r, and then basically what do? I just multiply these two, and this becomes 4 and 5/10 r. And that is my final solution. Okay, so basically again in this indicator, all we're doing, we are using properties of operations to generate equivalent expressions, and we are evaluating those expressions and we are solving it based on the properties. All right, have a nice day, guys.